Welcome to the Notes to My Legal Self, AI Insights, where law and AI collide. Get ready to level up your legal game with us. We've got career advice, cutting-edge developments, mind-blowing legal tech, and more. Know someone making waves in the legal AI world? Nominate them, or even nominate yourself. We love courageous souls. And don't forget, we want to hear from you too. Ask questions, drop comments. Let's build a community of legal superheroes. But here's the deal. We're all about to have a blast. AI may be serious, but we're here to make it fun. So buckle up, get ready to power up, and let's embark on this exciting journey together. Now, let's introduce your fearless host, Olga Mack. Get ready to dive into the awesomeness of Notes to My Legal Self, AI Insights. Let's go.
Well, hello, everyone. It's good to see you. We are about to have a fantastic conversation. Conor, welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I was looking forward to this. So I'm Conor Grennan. I'm the Dean of MBA students at the NYU Stern School of Business. I'm also the head of Generative AI at Stern, which is an initiative that levels up our MBA students, our professors, and our administrators. And then I also train companies, corporations, big keynotes, all that kind of stuff on generative AI and a new way to look at generative AI and a new way to implement it into companies, and also helping individuals to really level up on that. So that's kind of how I spend my days.
I love it. And if you're not following Conor on LinkedIn or YouTube, I think those are the two primary places where you show up. You should, because you will learn something every time you look at his posts or recording. Are there any other places where you hang out and share
It's
your
really
insights?
there. I mean, Twitter as well, a little bit, but LinkedIn it just feels like my office these days almost, I mean, outside of my actual, of course, NYU office, and then on YouTube also. But yeah, no, it's fun. I love the community on LinkedIn, and so I like spending time there. I tend to learn a lot as well, but I'm posting there every day about AI.
Yeah, I am with you. My office is my home office, so I say LinkedIn is my home for exactly the same reason. Community is just amazing. You have like-minded people, and they're not anonymous. You know who they are and what their backgrounds and where they come from, and the conversations are so much richer and connections are so much better, which is frankly how we met. So there you go. So you got to be where you are. What was your previous experience? How does one get up in the morning, become a Gen AI leader in NYU?
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, it's funny because I should say at the outset that I actually have no technical background. I don't have a machine learning background or an AI background or anything like that. And that's what I think is so interesting about generative AI. So yeah, my background is in academia, and it's in writing and speaking and things like that. I do a lot of coaching and stuff like that. But I got into this space because my wife is in this space, Liz Grennan. She's at McKinsey, and she's in the AI space. And back in, I don't know, January or something like that, she was like, hey, have you seen ChatGPT? And I hadn't really. And so I just started messing around with it, and immediately saw that this was going to really disrupt everything. And so I, as the dad to a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and also, working at NYU Stern, I was realizing, okay, so I have to, first of all, understand this really well. But second of all, for our students at NYU, I'm going to have to build some kind of framework to teach them, because they're going to have to know about this. And a lot of people at that point had heard of it, but hadn't really used it or didn't really know what it was. And so I built out this whole framework to teach our students and our faculty and everything else. Now that led to me doing this with other companies and everything like that, which I can talk about. But the interesting thing to me is that it didn't require any kind of again, technical background. I mean, it's such a communicative kind of conversational type of tool that really people who don't have a technical background, I think I can argue, and I have argued before, actually have a phenomenal advantage here. That's why my wife is a lawyer as well. And that's why I'm always sort of like so fascinated by how people are using it in different industries.
Yeah, well, using and building are different skills. And it is also true that technologies, that ubiquitous and touch everyone at one point or another have to include everyone, right? Not just builders. That has been true for SaaS. That has been true for internet, electricity, you name it. Any technology that wants to have a wide adoption needs to have inspired users, and they are sort of mission critical followers. Otherwise, it's just a theoretical possibility. And if you don't have that, for example, crypto has that problem.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just have a very cool technology. And I love the lesson of following your wife. You can
Yeah.
never go wrong with that.
Never. And this is the really crazy thing, because she doesn't have a technical background either, right? Excuse me. And so when we were first looking at all this, we're thinking, well, is there something kind of below the surface or something? Because the funny thing is, as you know, and I'm sure a lot of folks know too, there's no user guide to it. And that's a little bit of a confusing thing. Like, how do you have something this powerful, this software, that doesn't have a user guide? And the answer is really because it doesn't, it doesn't have sort of like one use case. And also, more importantly, it doesn't really act like software. It acts like a human. And this is like, especially in the legal realm and everything else, there's so much, originally, especially fear and apprehension around taking jobs and what's this going to do. And I think probably the existential threat conversation has gone down a little bit. But to me, the most important thing is going into, companies, whether it's, law firms or like larger financial institutions or any company really, and helping them sort of see this in a brand new way. Because one of the first things I always say is that this isn't actually really a digital transformation. It looks like a digital transformation because every new software and every new technology is essentially a digital transformation in one hand, in one sense or another. But this doesn't act like a digital transformation. It acts like a change management exercise. It acts like a leadership development exercise. And that's what's so interesting, because you're using the word inspire, and that's the word I love on this as well. Because again, if you are going to just bring people along on a digital transformation, right? Like sort of, you had people in an old system, like, whatever, and then you move into, a ServiceNow or a Salesforce or something like that kind of system. The way that typically works in corporations and anywhere is, everybody moves to the new system and you give them training guides and user guides and videos and all that kind of stuff. And then you basically burn down, the old model, and everybody's on this new system. And some people are using it better and some people are using it worse. But that's not how this acts either. I mean, this acts much more like trying to inspire people to, to lose weight or something like that, because it has to be the individual deciding to use it. And the level of productivity that this brings to an organization, especially in the legal field, which is really a text-based, language-based kind of industry, is absolutely extraordinary. And yet, time after time after time, I'm just not seeing organizations using it well, because they're looking for a couple of use cases. And again, that's not how this works. You have to look at it in a way, like completely different frame of mind and frame of reference, which is, to me, really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, having been in a few changes technologically speaking, I've been practicing for about 20 years, either as a practitioner of law or building legal tech. I've been an entrepreneur now for the last 5 years or so. This is the first time, I would say, in legal industry, what I would describe, instead of sort of fear and blanket no, hell no, or even harder no, we see what I would describe as nervous-sightedness. There's sort of a combination of a lot of nervousness, yes, because it's technology, it's unknown, and all that, and also excited because you won't be able to find a lawyer who likes the good old days. I mean, every lawyer, no matter what their relationship with technology, will comment on how much stupid work we're doing all day long that really should not be part of our jobs, that we could be much more strategic and helpful to our clients, have better lives, enjoy our careers. So nervous-sightedness is what I see, and we can use the word disruption. This field is changing. It's changing quickly, and 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now, it will be completely different. There will be no good old days. I am pretty sure. So in your view, how do you think
Yeah, I think law is one of the prime areas that's going to change the most, which is why I'm always stunned that, more law firms and legal entities aren't really totally embracing this. I mean, you said it yourself, like people need to be trained on this. I think there is a sense that, oh, well, we'll just sort of figure it out, or we have Microsoft Copilot and it'll help write emails faster and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but that's like, looking at your iPhone and being like, "Oh, this thing has a flashlight. This is amazing." And then not even like looking at the apps to the iPhone. Like the flashlight is great on your I use my flashlight all the time on my iPhone. But if I only use the flashlight, you'd really be doing yourself a disservice. And then everybody else around you who was actually using the iPhone for good would sort of skyrocket past you. And so this is a moment in time where if people aren't actually getting training on this, they are going to start to see their competitors really flying ahead of them. And in the legal space, I'm just not sure that there's a field that's more ripe for disruption, just because of kind of like what you were saying, right? I mean, generative AI doesn't take jobs, right? People say, "Oh, it takes jobs." That's actually not really true. What generative AI does is it attacks tasks. And when I say attacks, I mean in a very positive way. It can sort of take, these kind of like non-value add, kind of mundane tasks that could, excuse me, take a long time, and it reduces them to a very short amount of time, allowing then that individual to spend time on real value stuff, like spending time with clients and actually brainstorming and doing strategic planning and things like that. So everything from like the hiring process and who you're going to need to bring in to the roles that you have at your organization and everything else, unless you have a strategic framework by which to address this and strategically implement it into your organization, what you're going to have, and believe me, I've done this hundreds of times and I've seen it over and over again, is you're going to have certain individuals who know how to use it and are using it. And even if their hearts are in the right place and they're trying to train people around them, it doesn't work like that. It's sort of like, it's not about just sort of saying like, oh, well, you can use it for this and this and this, because once you sort of start giving people just like discrete use cases, people just use that use case because that's how the brain works. The brain wants something specific and discrete and understandable. Whereas this is much, much bigger than this. This is actually has the power to augment everything that your people do. And you've brought in your people for a reason, but it also has the power to reduce the amount of work, so to speed up the work, to increase the quality of work. Now, of course, we have to be careful about hallucinations. And I think that, in the legal space, people are so afraid of getting wrong answers, but that's not how this works either. So when we think about disrupting the industry, kind of coming back to your original question, it's going to utterly disrupt the industry if you let it. And when I say disrupt the industry, I mean that very literally. So what that means is that if you are an organization that has not gone all in and gotten training on how to do this, and train, because you have to both train, I have a whole framework by which I do this, but like you have to start at the top and you have to make sure that the top understands the benchmarks, like the senior staff understands the new benchmarks. Then you have to inspire your workforce. And then you have to look at reorging your entire workforce. That can be done slowly, but I'm just saying this is the best way to do it. But truly, like, you are going to skyrocket ahead if you do that. And if you don't, in an industry that's getting disrupted, you are going to be left so far behind, from your client standpoint, from your lawyer standpoint, everything else. So I'm just stunned when legal entities aren't getting training, aren't going all in, aren't sort of saying like, okay, we need an actual framework by which to learn this, not just some people use it, some people don't. That doesn't work. So it's a disruption unlike any other disruption. And I'll just add this one thing to it. If it was just a new tech, right? We talk about legal tech, right? If this was just a new tech, then that's one thing, but that's commoditized. That would mean if you had that tech first, then great, you have a 6-month head start on your competitors. Okay, that's great. That moves the needle. That's not what this is. Because there's no user manual and because it's not a commodity, some people will actually use it and then they are off and running, and other people are basically still in the starting blocks, feeling and thinking like they are using it well. But in fact, again, they're just using the flashlight, and maybe they've upgraded to also using text messages on that iPhone. And again, these other companies are like doing their personal banking and ordering Ubers and ordering food and all that kind of stuff on their phone. That's like the level of difference here. It's like the difference between somebody having electricity in their factory and somebody not having electricity in their factory. It's a wildly, incredibly huge difference between companies that are going to be using this well and have gotten trained on it and companies that haven't. And I see it every day.
So I love that analogy. It's sort of, as someone who also an artist, there is a difference between painting by numbers and painting, right?
Yeah.
And the painting by numbers is helpful. You will have something that you can put on your wall, but if you want to have a true artistic expression at some point, you graduate to something more exciting. And I love that you sort of starting out with use cases and frameworks. I love frameworks because they really are the only way to consistently make right choices in life. And what frameworks do you find very helpful, or what do you see successful organizations, whether they're legal organizations or in other industries, what frameworks do you find helpful in graduating from painting by numbers to actually painting, so to speak, in your professional life?
Yeah. So I don't think there are a ton of frameworks. I think that so I built out my own framework, and because there was nothing that existed, and the only thing I've seen that kind of like looks like a framework a little bit is like, oh, let's teach people what generative AI is and then teach them how to use it in their certain department, things like that. And it's not good. Sorry, it's just not good. I mean, and the reason it's not good is that that's sort of like your painting by numbers analogy, right? Which means that, yeah, you can give, your human resources capacity, your human capital department, 10 great use cases, and this will really speed them up. But it doesn't matter if they're sped up. What matters is, are they sped up relative to the competition? And that's the real problem. So I'll just say this. When I started teaching this, right? I started teaching it to our own school. And then I go out and started to ask companies like, hey, how are you guys using this? Because I'm trying to teach it to our students. This is last spring. And they were like, well, we're not really using it. And I was like, oh, well, it's really useful. And then they asked me if I could come in and train them. And so what I used to do is I used to go into like a C-suite, and I do, an hour training at some big, asset management firm or something like that. And after about an hour, they would be like flying on it, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to change everything." And I would walk away feeling like, first of all, that I was like, the greatest teacher in history, but also just feeling like, okay, this is, they now get it, right? But when I would check back in with them, I kept saying the same thing, which is like they hadn't really started to use it. They'd maybe kind of like used a few use cases, but not really. And so what I realized was that the problem wasn't teaching somebody the tool. The tool is extremely simple, extremely simple. The only skill that you need to use this tool is being able to talk like a human. That's literally it. Forget prompt engineering, forget all that stuff. You just need to be able to talk like a human. So I realized, like, if teaching somebody the tool, if they weren't getting it then, there must be something else happening here. And what I realized was happening after talking to my friends at NYU who are, in coaching and neuroscience and things like that, was that it's actually not about the tool. It's about behavior. Because if this is a tool that all you have to do is speak like a human, why shouldn't that be the absolute easiest thing in the world? Well, the reason is because it's hard to talk to a machine like a human. Your brain doesn't allow for it, because your brain has neural pathways that automate certain processes, which is why, if you see a baby, you don't have to think, oh, I better use baby talk. And if you see a college professor, you don't have to think, oh, I better use more sophisticated, right? Your brain has automated it to free up the prefrontal cortex, to sort of like do more high-end kind of thinking. But it is very, very hard if you told somebody, okay, you're going to talk to every kid that you see today like an adult, and every adult like a kid today. That's extremely hard to do because, again, your brain has automated something. So it's really about the behavior of how we interact with this tool. It's actually not about the tool. And so when I think about a framework, I build a framework around that, around, sort of getting people to rethink how they interact with generative AI, and giving them, kind of like a 3-part framework for how to do that and all that kind of stuff. Because if you just teach the tool, you're never going to get anywhere with especially with a team at large.
I love it. So it's harder to train the trainer than the dog, essentially, which is, anyone who ever had a dog knows. I grew up with dogs, and I know folks who train them. It's humans are the hardest folks to train, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And this is the thing, right? So it's the one of the real challenges is that if people are good with generative AI, they think that it should be super easy for everybody else too, right? Because you're like, but what's the problem? All you have to do is, it's like riding a bike, right? If you know how to ride a bike, and you have your friend doesn't know how to ride a bike, and your friend's like, well, how do you do it? It's like, well, you get on, you sit there, and you do the pedals like really, really fast. It's very easy to explain.
And you look super intense, and you break the wind, and you pretend you're in France.
Exactly. And you're going. But to explain what that motion is to somebody whose body is not accustomed to that is very difficult. And then again, sort of somebody who's good at this is why sort of, they say that, the best like basketball players don't make good coaches because they're expecting it to be very easy for everybody else. What you want is somebody who's gone through the process and learned, and then understand the learning process, not the end result. The end result does you nothing, which is why you actually need trainers who can take you through from like sort of like beginning, by the way, very quickly in like the workshops I do are half a day long, like 3-4 hours. And it gets you from, zero to getting to a spot where you're like an expert in running on it. But if you just rely on the people who are good at this already, again, it's like relying on the best basketball players in your neighborhood to teach everybody else. It doesn't work like that because they don't know what it takes to learn it. They just think it should be so easy because ChatGPT and generative AI in general, again, is extremely easy, but it's very complicated and not intuitive. That's the problem with it.
So you mentioned prompt writing, and I think you don't think it's worth teaching, but maybe I'm summarizing incorrectly based on one sentence you mentioned. So I'm going to ask you kind of more explicitly, what are your thoughts about prompt writing? Is that a useful skill? Should one, whether in law or somewhere else, invest in it? Is that a point in time skill? Is that a non-skill?
Right. Yeah.
Is it something that is here to stay and a real skill? Just thought, because I've seen and heard arguments in every one of those categories.
Here's the thing. Lawyers, if you're in the legal sphere, you will be outstanding at using generative AI, and you do not have to worry about prompting. Here's the thing. Here's why I don't teach prompt engineering or anything like that. And here's the reason. Prompt engineering is a term that sounds like something, and it sounds like something you have to learn in order to use this. And it's not. It is not. Prompt engineering is just literally another way of saying, how do you give instructions? And the best way that you can do this is, imagine if you sort of like had like a really brilliant intern and you were giving instructions to that brilliant intern. That's prompt engineering. But instead everybody says like, oh, well, we're going to, hire this person for 6 figures to do prompt engineering. It's utterly ridiculous. It's so frustrating to me because it makes people think that they can't do it and they have to learn something.
Yeah,
they
but
don't
Conor,
have to learn.
I remember being that intern and people giving me instructions. And I can tell you that my conversations with my peers throughout my career are basically reflections of adventures and misadventures in supervision. I don't know about business school. Maybe it's different. But law schools, my friend, we do not teach people how to supervise, give clear instructions, how to train.
Right.
We don't do that. Some of us are, I guess, good at it naturally. Some of us are not. Some of us has time. Some of them do not. Some of us, take it upon ourselves to learn. I'm pretty good at self-learning and reverse engineering pretty much anything. I'm now an expert at learning anything because in this thing called law, there are very few things that I haven't done. And I essentially perfected the art of getting in and owning it.
Yeah.
So it's true that you can talk theoretically to any intern, but practically speaking, very few leaders, managers, individual contributors can. That's humans. That's before we talk to a machine that could have an impact at scale. With humans, we're not really good at supervising, period.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because let's sort of take an example, right, of like what would be great for a human and great for ChatGPT, right? And I'm not engineering this so that it kind of comes out this way, but it literally sounds like the same instructions, right? So like and this comes from OpenAI themselves, right? This comes from the creators of these things say the same thing that I'm about to say. You can look it up. But essentially, like what they're saying is, now again, imagine like fill in the blank here, whether it's ChatGPT or an intern, and it's going to sound the same. So first of all, you want to give, pretty explicit instructions, right? You'd like to sort of like take kind of like a step-by-step instructions. You'd also want to give that person or ChatGPT context. What's the context around this? What are you trying to do? And then if they're sort of going a little bit off the rails or they're doing something wrong, what do? Well, you give examples. Hey, here's how I do it. Here's one way of doing it. If they're sort of like getting a little flustered, you might say, hey, listen, just take a deep breath. Like, let's go step by step. So those things that I just said, right? All of them work really, really well for giving instructions to interns and like leading and supervising and managing. And those literal same ones I took directly from OpenAI's instructions on how to use ChatGPT to the point, where it's even if you say to ChatGPT, take a deep breath and think about this slowly. Go step by step on this. No, no, no. You're very, very good at this. You can do this, encouraging it. All those things actually get better responses out of ChatGPT. Now, certainly an intern, but out of ChatGPT, what does that tell you? It tells you that this thing acts exactly like a human. But again, our brains don't allow us to sort of think that way. So that's why I sort of put aside prompt engineering, and I have a whole different framework by which I teach people. So, and at the end of our session or whatever, you have to inspire people to do it, because here's the other thing. People can choose whether or not they're going to use this, and there's no way for you as a leader to understand whether your people are using it. This is not a digital transformation. This is only like you have to sort of hope that if you're having like an office versus office weight loss competition, that some people in your office aren't going home and eating donuts. And how do you do that? You inspire them, say, hey, this is our moment. We can do this together. This is accountability. This is great. We're going to do it together. But that's what this training looks like. It looks much more like interacting with humans, when you're dealing with the machine itself, or inspiring your workforce in such a way. That's why I teach more creativity than productivity. I used to teach only productivity, but the creativity turned out to be such a better way of just instructing people that I sort of have been veering toward that. And it's just fascinating.
I'm as somebody who plays with ChatGPT quite a lot. I do think it's a very creative tool. Once you sort of, and it's true with any tool, once you sort of understand the limits and depth and breadth of a tool, it's much easier to be creative with it. And it's definitely, I agree with you, it has a lot of human characteristics, to the point that I told my spouse that now he should worry about me and my bot. You work with a lot of companies, and you see some of them do well with this tool and inspire productivity and creativity, and frankly, more excitement about the jobs folks do today. And some of them maybe not so good. Law aside, what are sort of characteristics or practices that you see that really help embrace this tool and make the most of it?
Yeah, I mean, so for the most part, it's not a ton of companies doing it well. I'll be honest. And so what I try to do with companies, and the ones that I think really take it on and do it well, is they think of this as a learning journey, not a technical journey. And so what I mean by that is that first of all, you have to start at the top, and people at the top have to understand what it is so that they can talk to their people about it. So I'm talking kind of like C-suite and like one level down or whatever. Not only have to know how it works and what you can do with it and all that kind of stuff in a really strategic and systematic way, not just, hey, here's an example of how you can get recipes or something like that, like something that's really strategic. But also that group has to be the ones to understand what the new benchmarks for your organization will be. And that's critical, because if you just sort of talk to the employees of an organization, again, some will use it, some won't. You have to have this at the top saying, hey, now I know that, writing up these reports and doing all this research, it used to take 6 hours to do that. Now I know that it only takes 2 hours to do it. Like, it's the gaps, that you can sort of like make up in efficiency and quality are huge. They're huge. So the ones that do well start there. They start at the top. They have the leadership doing it. And then what those companies do when they do it well is, and this is what I do with companies, maybe there's other ways that other people do this, but like, then you come in and you actually inspire the workforce. Because if you just tell the workforce what to do, some people will do it and some people don't. It's not like if you use a new CRM tool or something like that, or whatever new tech tool you have, where people have no choice but to use this tool. And again, some people are better at it, some people are worse, but everybody has no choice. People have a choice whether to use this and whether to become more efficient. And to get them excited about that is the most important thing, because you show them like, this is actually going to impact your life and your career and everything like that. So companies that sort of start at the top and understand that I can work with at the top, and then working with the workforce, those are the companies that and that take it sort of like a learning journey, that we're all doing this together and keep an open mind, all that kind of stuff. Those are the companies that I see doing it really well. And in the legal space, it's phenomenal. The gains that you can make in sort of outpacing your competition, it's just like nothing else I've ever seen.
We're coming to the end. I think you and I can have this conversation all day, but sadly, we don't have the time. So, but I do have a couple of questions, and I actually want to focus on individuals. You can't expect your leaders to always be on top of it. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Sometimes as an individual professional, you want to take things in your hands make sure that you have a prosperous economic life in this world, what are the top 3 things you would recommend a girl named Olga who gets up in the morning and wants to make sure that she continues the same standard of living for her? By the way, I have 12 and 14-year-old, as you do, for her 12 and 14-year-old and her significant other.
Yeah, I mean, I never like to say, oh, just kind of like practice on this thing. But in fact, like what I would do is first understand the tool. The way that you do that is to sort of look at your day and start breaking up your job into tasks and start just applying one task to it and then another task to it, another task to it. Because this thing has incredible capabilities. And so that's the way that you really start to get to use it at work. And that's hugely impactful because it makes you more productive. And then, I'm talking about how people can help themselves. If I just talk about how people can help their companies, people aren't that interested in helping their companies. They're interested in helping themselves. But luckily, that actually helps the company as well. But there's so much you can do with this. And it's not just in your work life. I mean, like ChatGPT, the Plus account has, vision. You take a photo of your laptop and, on a software that's not working properly and say, hey, what's happening here? And it will look at it and say like, oh, here's how you do that. Here's how you change it. It's incredible. Like just the tools that are available now. So I think first just like getting on it and working on it. And again, breaking your job down into tasks is huge. I think the second thing for leaders of a company is that you have to get training for your people. By the way, I would also say this for individuals. Like, you have to educate yourself. I'm working at putting out a product by which to do that, but I also come into companies and things like that. But it's really, really critical to understand in a systematic way how to learn, because there's not that many good training opportunities or training courses on this. Again, because there's no user guide to it. It's not one way of learning it. So you have to figure out the best way to learn it. And the third way is, and this sort of goes a little deeper, but I would say, stay fairly educated. Like, I host the AI Applied podcast, which keeps people up to date on the news. And, with my buddy Jaden, who has the number one AI, podcast in America or in the world, I think now. But we just do this thing about like, hey, here's the newest AI and here's how you apply it. And not getting just overly caught up in like the newest, greatest thing out there, but just find a couple of people you trust, follow them on LinkedIn, find the podcast that you like maybe find a newsletter that you like or something like that. But don't feel like you have to see everything. Don't feel like you have to try out every new tool. Don't feel like you have to read every single bit of news as to sort of what's happening, because you'll get absolutely overwhelmed. Focus on your tasks, focus on getting training for yourself and for others in your organization. And then just find one or two people like on LinkedIn or a podcast or something like that you can just like listen to just to sort of like keep up generally, but don't feel like you have to do it all.
I love that advice. That's maybe narrowed down to lawyers, because as you mentioned, hallucination or hallucination are definitely a problem. It's been in the news. I'm not going to recite it. Some very prominent lawyers
Yeah.
have been burned. It's been well publicized. This is a profession where reputation is basically all you have. This is basically the future of your economic prosperity in practicing law. So if you lose it, you kind of lose it. So as a more general question is, you say you tried generative AI, whether it's ChatGPT or something else, and you got burned or you got overwhelmed. It does look like a deceptively easy technology. It has a lot of traps for unwary. There's an opportunity to be a babe in the woods very quickly. And as a lawyer, you really don't like the look of babe in the wood, because that's not why you're hired. So if you want to overcome overwhelm, burnout, fear, all kinds of other things, prospects of losing your reputation as a lawyer, what are sort of the top 3 tips you would recommend folks do specifically to make sure that in the end, again, going back to being able to have as good or better living standards for themselves and their loved ones?
Yeah, I think this is critical, because I think what you're talking about with reputation is really, really important. And hallucinations are real. So I think you know what they are, but essentially that's when, ChatGPT or another tool tells you something extremely convincingly, but it actually turns out to not be true. So probably folks watching have seen this in the news, where people come up with fake legal cases to back up their argument or make their argument. Very, very dangerous, obviously, right? So, first of all, I would just always verify. If you're asking it for information, verify that information. And there's a very easy way to do that. It's just Google. You just go over to Google. Now, hallucinations have been cut down on dramatically if you're using a Plus account. I always really strongly advise people to get a ChatGPT Plus account. It's $20 a month. And with that, you have access to the internet. You have just a much better model for writing and researching and all that kind of stuff. Like, it also has other tools associated with it, which are excellent. But protect your reputation first. And remember that it can actually be a great knowledge tool, but when you're looking at just like super up-to-date things, it's also just a great reasoning tool. That means that if you have a brief or something like that, and you just put it in there, it's not going to hallucinate. It's going to read that brief and it's going to tell you things like that. Whereas if you say, hey, find me a court case, that's a little riskier. Always back that stuff up. It's a phenomenal reasoning tool. It's not as good a knowledge tool. However, now, if you have a Plus account or something like that, or if you use a tool like Perplexity, which I love, then these are almost like replacements for Google search, and they can find this information. It'll give you the citation so you know that it's telling the truth. I would absolutely just start using it, though, for researching and writing and things like that. Even just that, you're going to kind of come away way, way ahead. But first, just remember, don't upload proprietary data to it. Just not because somebody else is going to steal it. It doesn't work like that. But just in case there's a data breach or something like that. And second of all, just make sure that if you are asking for, current information, that you're just validating and verifying that information on a tool like Google.
Yeah, that was a great insight. And, in addition, there are other sort of proprietary law-specific actual tools that have various opportunities to stop hallucinations and really make sure that you provide great work product. I'm similar to you. I actually share the framework on ACC, which is Association of Corporate Counsel, that kind of does a few things. One, shares, look at all your tasks you have, prioritize them from highly risky to no risk. At the point you give legal advice, it is highly risky. At the point you submit papers to the court, it's highly risky. But your marketing material isn't, because that by definition goes to the public and doesn't require the same level of scrutiny. So everything we do in our legal career is actually not that high risk. Some is medium, and some is actually low to no risk at all. And so if you kind of start from a low risk and verify and have the right account and use proprietary tools from a high risk, you will absolutely use it in a better way and preserve your reputation, and actually will see a significant change in your practice. And yes, you absolutely must take care of information that is confidential. That is your ethical duties. That is the quickest way to get disbarred. So for breach reasons and for ethical duties, that is a big, big no-no. But in that sort of, it's not a black and white world. It's a world full of gray, where you, as a risk-trained professional lawyer, can make some really important decisions if you actually look at your practice holistically and are honestly behind the wheel. Conor, this has been a fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot from you. We covered a lot of ground. What is the one takeaway or an action you want folks to take to make sure that they have a prosperous and exciting practice of law for years to come?
Yeah, I would say just learn how to use this thing. Whatever you think that you're doing, just like me, like, there's always so much more we can learn. So just, look for those resources, find ways of, working together with other people. Sometimes that works really well. But it is critical that you get really, really fluent in this, because if you can, you're really going to separate yourself out from, other organizations, but even just like, your colleagues and everything else. Like, this is an incredible personal business, development tool, even just for you. Forget about their company, everything like that. But even just for you, it's a really phenomenal tool.
I love it. Thank you so much for this conversation. If you are not following Conor on LinkedIn or YouTube, do yourself a favor and do exactly that. And I will definitely see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
And that brings us to the end of another thrilling episode on the Notes to My Legal Self AI Insights. We had a fantastic time exploring the fascinating intersection of law and AI with you. But hold on tight, because the adventure doesn't stop here. Stay connected with us on social media to continue the conversation, share your thoughts, and be part of our incredible community of legal enthusiasts. Together, we can inspire, learn, and make a real impact on the world of law and AI. If you enjoyed today's episode, we encourage you to share it with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who could benefit from the exciting insights we discussed. Let's spread the knowledge and enthusiasm far and wide.